This is the homework helper for Workbook 7-7, choosing an appropriate display. So, as you can see, questions 1 through 4 are grouped together, so you're doing the same basic thing in 1 through 4. You're supposed to tell me which type of graph that you've seen in the chapter best represents the data. So you can choose from any of the graphs we've studied, whether it's the bar graph or the line graph or the scatter plot or the frequency table or the histogram or whichever. The one graph that we really didn't spend any time on, but you're familiar with, is the circle graph, which is what you see in question 5. And of course, the time you use the circle graph is when the data somehow talks about percentages, if those percentages add up to 100%, or they represent all of the data. So we'll keep that in mind as we look at these questions here. Number 1 is the number of points scored by 5 different basketball players in a game. You've got a myriad of options here that will actually work, but probably the best answer for number 1 is a bar graph, because a bar graph displays data in distinct categories, and that's what we're talking about. Each player is kind of their own category here. And we'll also take a look at number 2, and I'll leave 3 and 4 for you to do on your own. They're talking about the distribution of test scores in a math class. A couple different ways you could look at this. If you want to look at this in terms of who got an A and who got a B and who got a C and who got a D and who got an F, you're probably going to look at making a frequency table. The frequency table would show that. You could set it up to show 50 to 59, 60 to 69, 70 to 79, 80 to 89, 90 to 99, and so on. You could also then, because you would have to make these two hand in hand, a frequency table would also go with a histogram. So histogram could also show that. Also acceptable here would be a line plot. A line plot, remember, is the one that has a number line and then you put the X's over it to show where the data falls. That would work here because you're going to have a lot of numbers to show. You could also put these in a stem and leaf plot as well. A stem and leaf plot is going to show you how those numbers lay out, especially if you make an ordered stem and leaf plot. You're going to see, for instance, if we're looking at the scores in the 90s, and we break that up here, how many kids are in that A range and then how many are in the B range when I show the 80s, and so on and so forth. So lots of different answers there, and there's not necessarily always one firm answer. As you can see from that question, sometimes there are many. Okay, let's move to the bottom there. As you can see in 5 and 6, again, you're doing the same thing here. In 5 and 6, it says the table shows the earnings of the Sandman Company during each of 5 years. Explain why each does or does not represent the data. So you've got this data table here, and you're supposed to say why or why not does this represent the data well or even correctly. As you can see, this graph is about time, and we know that time most often is well represented with a line graph. So we would keep that in mind looking at 5 and 6 because one of these is a line graph. But I'm just going to look at number 5 for a minute here. Number 5 is being represented in a circle graph, and a circle graph would have to show all of the profits. And we don't know if these years that are shown represent all of the profits, if there's other years they've been in business or whatnot. So the circle graph does not represent the data because it may not represent all of the years. It certainly represents the years in the table, but it may not represent all of the years that the company has been in business.